Good evening. Welcome to Silver Slumbers, a channel where I'm tasked to help you get those soothing Z's that you deserve. If you have any suggestions such as story topics or what kind of background noise you're interested in, I'll put a poll in the community tab before uploading the next video. This will be a great way to have you all interact with me, and vice versa. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos like this, and watch a playlist in the playlist tabs to get hours of content to sleep through. Lastly, if you are enjoying what you are hearing, down below in the description box, if you'd like to buy me a coffee, it'll be really appreciated as it does help me and the channel out. I thank you in advance. In today's video, I'm going to be reading True Night Shift Stories, Volume 1. So sit back, relax, and close those eyes, and remember, don't get lost in the dark. Warning, some of these stories contain graphic content. Viewers' discretion is advised. It was 3 a.m. Popular Canadian coffee shop. There is one old baker in the back that rarely interacts with me past a dirty joke or a dirtier ditty from his Navy days. Other than that, I'm alone. Not another soul in the area, and I expect it to remain so for at least another hour yet. I'm boxing up the old days for the homeless shelter when I swear I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's behind me. I turn, then look down. There was a small child standing there, a native little toddler with a fox hawk staring at me intensely. I'm struck dumb with how absurd the situation is. How did he get behind the counter? I didn't hear the door open or see him come through the counter. I scanned the storefront. No one. I yell for the baker in case he has a friend or something visiting that lost their kid. He comes over and, just like me, does a double take at the kid and is baffled. The kid starts muttering incoherently. I get him a glass of water and a donut hole, and the baker runs out of the store to do a perimeter check on the block. I call the non-emergency line and explain I have a little kid with no parents. I can't get any information from the boy, just mumbles I just can't make out. The police arrives. Baker comes back, says that he couldn't find anyone else in the streets. The guy from the 24/7 corner store said that he'll keep an eye out. Police try to speak to the kid and also get nothing but mutterings and half-hearted gestures. They take him away. I saw the same cops again in the morning drinking coffee. I talked to them and they told me that the little guy walked several kilometers from the nearest reservation in the dead of night to my store. He got into his parents' medicine cabinet and just walked out of the house. I'm floored. It must have been that poor baby hours to get to me. Seeing him behind me like that in the dead of night still shakes me. Spooks me more than the guy that threw a pot of coffee at me. The woman tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused her to get a metal one. And the dude that waited for me for 4 hours, hoping to catch me alone so he can teach me a lesson since I didn't have the flavor of bagel he wanted. Sheesh. I hope that kid's okay. Many years ago, I worked at a regional radio station in the middle of effing nowhere, Australia. I was the overnight operator, keep the overnight playlist running, keep up for the morning, do all the manual checks for the next day, and jump on the desk if anything funky happens. I spent a lot of time sitting on the essentials and tin can shit in the middle of the padlock, with my dog, shoes off, listening to my 50s and 60s music, and doing crossword puzzles. Except one night, when the ruse shooters came through, they spooked the kangaroos in the padlock, and one of them jumped headfirst through the office window. So there's me, barefoot and half asleep, when a 6-foot-tall kangaroo smashes through my glass window. Blood everywhere and glass all over the floor. My dog starts chasing the kangaroo. I'm chasing my dog, and the kangaroo bounds around the office, knocking crap off my desk in the dark, bleeding everywhere. I ran and opened the studio bay doors, and my dog chased it outside, where I'm assuming the poor thing, the kangaroo, was shot. Then I had to call my boss, edit, Bandit, the dog, was fine. She lived a long and healthy life. The kangaroo, though, I'm not sure where it went. Okay, so a little backstory before I tell you one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my second year as a security officer from 2023 and 2015. I'm a 6 foot 7 inches male in Australia. I like to think that I'm fairly tough and intimidating guy, but some of the crap that I used to go on the mall that I used to work at night shifts still, for some reason, still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large. Probably the largest in my state, I'd say. And all the way up to about 8:30 p.m., it would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we still manage to usher out all the stragglers out. And only by 11 p.m. would all the business owners have left. My job is to basically patrol the entire mall and make sure that no one was sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons. Only have a can of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around trying to break into shops after dark, but they would normally be far outnumbered by 4 or 5 of us on the shift. They would usually just be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night, though, crap started really getting really weird for me at the night shift. So I'd say about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was just standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This is the only part of the mall that had any kind of light during the nighttime due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating, though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway leading off to the food courts and to some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge and I flickered my torch, flashlight, without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway with a flashlight in my hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hallway, the noise became louder and louder until I was at the end of the hallway and there was the toilet doors to the left and right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilet room. I gripped the handle and opened the door in the tiny little crack. The noise was now very clear and had me not too scared, but more confused. I yelled, "Oi, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listening hard though, through the tiny crack of the door. I swear to effing God that I can hear breathing. Low male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tight and flick on my radio. "This is 1-3. I need help in the food court bathrooms. I think there's someone here." No response. This was really strange and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. "This is 1-3. Does anyone copy?" Still, no response. I can remember whispering to myself, "What the actual F?" I again opened the door a tiny crack. "Listen, mate," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't effing come out here with your hands up, you're going to be eating up your teeth tonight. Do you want that?" I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point. But there was no response. In fact, now, there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom. "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you don't do anything stupid, it's not going to be my fault. You'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female's bathroom? What was the metal noise? What the F is even happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight across the room. All the cubicles were open, which was weird, but other than that, the room was totally empty. I was totally crapping myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me. Scared to the core, I let out a faint. This is like some horror movie crap. Come out. When I heard the long, whining squeak of a door behind me, I span around, basically crying at this point and showing my torch on some effing massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed in my state at the time. He was Caucasian and at least in his 40s, with gray, matted hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me with that smiley of guilty effing smile like a kid would make when he was caught stealing biscuits or some crap like that. I'm not gonna lie, I was so scared. I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth. He shushed me before opening the door all the way out and sprinted out with what looked like some type of small metal box in his hand. Turns out he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so effing close to him, and I didn't even effing notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something, and that thought alone still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on it, telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had the similar stories, but none that were as close as mine. I worked a night shift for another week, but after that, I quit. I'm not sticking around at a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason my radio just effed itself. But why? So weird guy in the toilets? Let's not meet ever again. P.S. I know I laid it out as weird that I had to re-upload this like 50 times due to the whole wall of text thing. This is also a true story. Reading it over, I realized how badly it is written, but this did happen to me. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned this in the actual post, but I have no clue what happened to the guy. The other staff fully swept the entire mall after I met up with them. I didn't sweep the mall with them because I was so disturbed about what happened, but I know that at least on that day, they did not find anyone. Also, I don't think he stole the metal box for, the female products. I don't know what the box is from or what it was for, but anyways, tell me, what do you think about my story? So this happened a little over 2 years ago now, and I wanted to post this somewhere just to look back at one of the days that I'll never forget this lesson. So it's 2016, and I just had started a new job at the motel. It was a low pay, but I needed an office job. One of my friends, Michael, he got me this job. For a few days, I did train with the owner for the mornings. For the nights, Michael trained me. Our job is from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing exciting, just checking guests and doing paperwork. My boss, the owner, went away with his wife on a vacation for a week, which attributes to the swift training that I had to endure. So it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with the security cameras around the motel's property. Large glass windows all around the office building with a glass door. There was no night windows like most motels have. It was fairly early in the night, at around 1 in the morning. I was just doing my normal check-ins and paperwork when a man walks in and asked if we have any rooms available. Usually if someone is sketchy, my boss has me to lie to say no, but he seemed normal at the moment. Without hesitation, I said, yes, of course, just for one, right? He replies, yes. So I began creating this reservation on the computer when I noticed that he starts swatting the air and making spitting noises as if he was surrounded by flies. I tried to ignore it. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't my business, so I tried to check him in as quickly as possible. I gave him his key and he was on his way. At this point in time, I could describe him as very timid. I had a lot of going on in my personal life, so I hope you all can understand my reaction to what happens next. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door. This caused me to jump. Absolutely frightened, I looked up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door and puts his head through and says, "I can't get my room." why won't you let me open into my room? And my only defense is trying to be helpful, so I replied, maybe there's something wrong with your key. Let me give you another one, sir. The look he had in his eyes was inexplicable. I feel like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key and he went back to his room. I tried texting Michael because he was the one that trained me. Though it was the middle of the night and he was asleep, I just needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back. I go in this absolute panic mode. I run back into the back office and lock the door, and I pulled out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when I work at night. I hear the man in the office yelling, "Hello? Hello? Why won't you let me into my room? Do you not like me?" Me being an absolute idiot and not staying my ground and calling the police when I feel scared, I decide to take the situation on alone. I reply, I'm just on the phone. I'll be right out. I then start calling Michael over and over for help. No answer. I decide to take a few deep breaths, then step out of the office. The man was not there. He was in the bathroom. I start hearing him talking to himself angrily saying, "Kill her. Kill her." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police. He comes out and I say, "Your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long sleeve sweater, so my arms were down and I was able to hide a knife into my hand while holding it. I began to walk outside and he seemed insistent to walk behind me. He began to make our way to the staircase and up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, continuously looking behind me to make sure that he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room and I stop at his room, a few doors down. I smile and say, "Oh, no, that's the wrong room. This one is your room," as it clearly said on the door and the key. The whole time he was going to someone else's room and trying to open the door. My God, I felt bad for them. I quickly went back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns away. I feel bad for confiding in about the guy that seemed to be willing to keep an eye out and ear out. The next night, the man came back and we were all booked up, actually at this time. I explained to my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take me seriously. I continued to work there on night shifts for the next year, where many strange encounters happened. So strange, man, let's never meet again. Lastly, if you ever feel uncomfortable, always call the police. This happened to me about a week ago. I found a summer job in our local supermarket, and about 2 weeks in, I got asked to work the late night shift, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. I accepted since I was in need of money, and I never sleep early. Everything was fine and dandy until about 3 a.m. when a shirtless, scarred-up guy came into the store. After lingering around the store for a while, he quickly came up to the counter, making intense eye contact with me. As I was about to ask him what he needed to help with, he whispered to me, "Don't you dare move." I didn't hear him at first, so I asked if he could repeat that. At the point, he got agitated and yelled out, "Make another sound and I'll cut you up." In a swift motion, he vaulted over the counter, going for the alcohol section, trying to grab a bottle of whiskey. Thankfully, the owner hid a baseball bat under the counter. The moment he turned his back on me, I took the bat and swung full force at his knee. He winced and cried in pain and tried to get up. I whined my bat again, acting like I was going to hit him again, just to see him pull out a handmade shiv at some point. I let him get up. In that moment, he got up and swung his shiv at me, lightly cutting my wrist. I pushed him back with my bat, and he ran for the door and got out. The day after, I called the cops and showed them the security footage, but they haven't contacted me since. I think it's safe to say that I won't be working the late night shifts ever again, at least for a long time. So, scarred, shirtless guy, let's not meet ever again. A little over a year ago, I had a job working a night shift at a gas station close to my house. I am a woman. I was 31 at the time. I know that to some it may seem unsafe for a woman to work a graveyard shift by herself, but however, it was a slow store and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think I would have had many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute check the trash. It was time for a cigarette, and I had one headphone in my ear, and I was kind of jamming out. Across the road, in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much-needed pee. Against the sheriff's office, though, right? Yeah. The building closed at 4 p.m. and didn't open again until 6 the next morning. But why? By the back of his ripped white shirt, I remember that he came in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell that he was going to be having good buzz. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off him and tried to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car, and then at me, and back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside. I still had a half a smoke burning and had left my dustpan outside with a squeegee. We both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly engage in an argument by himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one who should be more afraid of me, or I don't know, something like that. The man was still there, but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he was yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk and can barely stand straight. Still swaying away, I did engage with him, but I didn't take my eyes off him this time. I just slowly walked away into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during the graveyard shifts has always been with a crazy one-eyed dude, or whatever's worse than that. I didn't like it at all, and wanted no part of it. I still had 3 hours to go, and 2 before any other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign, just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the corner on my way to the door. When I saw him, he walked across the road to my side now. I literally just got barely a second to lock the door when he stumbled into a very small parking lot. My hand mimed to the hand signal for cut across the neck, basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here, we're closed." I shook my head back and forth hoping to further discourage him. He started walking away, but screamed something at me while he was walking. I don't mean that he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an a-hole or anything. I mean like he was at the enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. It was very disturbing. Definitely knowing that I'm in the wrong shift, of the wrong job. I really skidded out. I decided to call the cops. It was a good thing too, because the minute I hung up with them, there he comes again, up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it, trying to ram it. Not that it would have done any good. I made a mistake of telling him that I had called the cops. I say that I made a mistake of telling him because once he took off, the police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for about an hour, but found no one. He was on foot, so I don't get where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't file a police report or anything. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have had to spend the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I'll never know what the right choice was. I'm just glad that I don't work there anymore. This encounter happened to me about a couple days ago. It was a normal Friday night like any other. Watched some late night TV. We've all been there. But when I went to get some snacks for my viewing, I noticed my cupboard was bare. So I decided to make a quick run to the local gas station to pick up a cheap midnight snack. It was late and it was the only place that was within a walking distance that was open. But when I got to the gas station, there was this man there, disheveled hair. He looked young, but his skin was oddly weather-beaten for someone at that young-looking age, and his eyes had these yellow spots on them. Unnerving to say at the least, but he was also the cashier, so I didn't have much reason to be afraid of him yet. I grabbed some stuff, lay down on the counter, and started fishing around for my debit card. The cashier smiles. "Would you like those Gatorades?" His teeth. I've never forget about those teeth. The only way I could describe them was pure evil, almost like they didn't fit his head. I nodded politely, praying silently that it'll be the end of it. He brings up my groceries, and I scan my card. And then he says, "Hold on, I need to replace the printer paper." And he walks back somewhere that I can't see. When I look at the card scanner, there's no printer feed on it at all. Okay, fair enough. Maybe I don't understand how receipt scanners work. Maybe I don't know where I look for a receipt to come out. But then I see this other guy at the door. He's trying to lock it. My red flags are going off like crazy. I grab my card and leave my groceries there. I rush to the door. I'm pounding on it like crazy, and the other guy is trying to stop me. I hear the cashier coming back, so I panicked and pushed the other guy into one of the aisles, giving me the opportunity to unlock it and rush out. I've never been back to that gas station since. Now I know to buy my groceries ahead of time. But if I'm at another store, creepy gas station guys, let's not meet ever again or anywhere else. I work in a fairly busy hospital downtown in the NICU. I usually work at night, and I kid you not, this happened to me less than 5 minutes ago. I figure it would be good to get this down in writing before I forget. It's also a way for me to have some kind of proof, and just in case something comes up to it. During orientation, we are taught to be observant of any signs of possible abductor. We were taught to look for oversized clothing, bags, and shifty behaviors. Luckily, I've never encountered a strange individual until just now. It's currently 2:59 in the morning, and I've been sitting at the front desk since 11. I'm a nursing student, so I usually just do clinical work around the unit. I also just watch the cameras just to make sure that no one is supposed to be here if they're not. It's usually pretty quiet at night. However, I've already had some sort of weird night, so this just adds a cherry on top. The NICU in most of the second floor is a locked unit. This means that in order to gain entrance, you have to pick up a phone which will ring to the desk. Usually it's parents wanting to see their babies and family members who are lost. It quiets down around 11, so no one usually comes in or out during my shift, with the exception of housekeeping. One of the security cameras is situated so I can see who is picking up the first phone. I had been sitting here browsing Reddit when the phone rang. I glanced over the phone thinking it was a parent wanting an update or something like that. It took me a second to register that it was a number of the first set of doors phone. I picked it up, looked over to the screen. There was a lady in baggy clothing with a sling on her arm. I answered the door and she said she wanted to come in to find her cousin, who apparently had been brought to emergency department. I asked for the last name, and she unintelligibly ribbled off a Latino name that I only caught only the first part of it. Knowing that we did not have any new admissions, I told her we don't have anyone by that name. I tried to get some information out of her, and she again said that her cousin had been brought up from the ED. I told her in that case she would want to go to labor and delivery and talk to them. She hesitated and then said, "Okay," and walked away. I got a weird feeling from her, So I checked the census to see if there was anyone that was being assessed in the LD. LD for labor and delivering, and there wasn't. So either she was in the wrong hospital, or she wanted to be in the unit to do something a little bit more sinister than just see her cousin. I shrugged it off and figured that it was her cousin in the L&D. That and she would find her cousin and all would be well. About 5 minutes later, the same lady appeared in her extremely baggy clothing in her sling. The only difference was that this time, she was putting the sling on and using her injured hand to mess with something in her oversized sweatshirt. She picked up the phone and once again asked to be let in to find her cousin, and that L&D said that they had no one by that name. I told her the exact same thing and that she would need to go in contact with her cousin and go over to the L&D. She got hostile for a second and then hung up the phone. Whether or not she was trying to gain access to the unit for things that she shouldn't be doing, I'll never know. But creepy lady who looked like a baby snatcher, let's never, ever meet again. Maybe it's just me, but this really freaked me out, and I just had started to work in the graveyard shed at a gas station close to my house. I believe it was my 6th shift altogether, with the 4th being all by myself. It was just after 11 o'clock p.m., and this man came in. He was about 40 and had the dumbest haircut I've ever seen. It's like a botched bowl cut. Anyway, he asked me if I had any change for 100. I told him I was sorry, but I wasn't allowed to take it, and even if I was, I didn't have the change for it. Side note, the company's 3rd shift policy was that we were not allowed to take any 50s or $100 bills. Period. Well, he got upset and started complaining. He started trying to talk me into getting him change from the safe. I apologized, but again said that I couldn't. I tried my best to continue on the elderly customer waiting right behind him. He called out to his friend to ask if he had anything smaller. The kind lady I was waiting on asked me to hold her bag while she used the restroom. Bullcut's friend comes in, and I immediately saw that he was on drugs. Now, I try not to judge people, but it was obvious. His face was covered in sores. He kept touching them, and he kept bouncing in places on his toes, like some kind of tweaker prize fighter. The friend started asking me questions. Hey, sweetheart, how you doing? Are you always here all by yourself? Do they let you have weapons behind the counter? And if so, do you carry one with you at work? I always carry a gun. How much money do you allow to carry in the drawers? Do you still have to use safe drops, even through business was so slow? Each question that he asked made me slightly more uncomfortable. I'm kind of a mouthy woman, and I don't always use my head before I speak. Finally, I interrupt him and was like, look, do you plan on robbing me? Because if you are, then you're wasting your time. I don't have time for this and need to get back to work. His hands fly up and he started sputtering. Whoa. Rob you? What the F? I was just trying to make conversation. What is wrong with you? I answered with, well then, your conversation skills could really use some work. You don't go on asking women if they work alone on overships. Those type of questions, you know? So, the real question is, what is wrong with you? I now saw that the bowl cut guy had pulled into the car horizontally across the parking lot. He parked right across from the front door. Upon seeing this, I was just beyond done at this point. I told him to leave the store and to never ever come back during my shift, or I called the cops. And by that, he left. The poor woman who had gone to the bathroom had heard some of the exchange. She came up to me before leaving the store and asked if I was all right. I told her that I was, and I thanked her. Just a weird customer that gave me the weird feeling. He only came back once after that. I was in the cooler, and I could hear him yelling at the manager about not being allowed in the store. The manager told him to listen to the audio and would have done the same thing if I did. I know that some could possibly be thinking that I was overly defensive and dramatic, but he was probably asking about the money because I couldn't exchange his friend's 100. But what about the other questions he asked? Those are weird. So creepy bullhead guy and his friend, let's never meet again. Since I'm at home because of my fibro disability, I got a lot of time to read these chilling tales. It also gives me time to look back on my own past, remember some of my own scary moments. I had several more stories to tell. This was one of those memories that I remember that I wanted to share. Back in 2007, I worked at a tech job with a IP phone VoIP DT long distance company. This company is no longer around, and honestly, I don't know how they even started in business as long as they did. It was really a pyramid scam, but thankfully, I was on the IT side of things, so I didn't have to sell anything. It was a typical tech support call. The customers will call in, or Verizon, Quest, etc. They will call and say that DT1 lines are down. I was the only female on my team, having to prove myself and show that I could do anything as my male counterparts could. It didn't take long, and the customers respect me for being able to handle anything. After making the mark, I decided to take the 10-hour night shift. I work from Wednesday through Saturday, from 1 p.m. to midnight. I get 1 hour lunch, and after 6 p.m., I was completely alone in the building. The rush to get out of the office was by 6 p.m. It was just insane. I couldn't blame them, but I decided having 3 days off was better than having 2. Like I said, I was all by myself for most of the night. I would have to keep an eye on emails and make sure that I answered every phone call. It was a very slow shift. I would get a lot of video game, reading school, homework, anything done during this time. But sometimes, I would just wander around the building, walk around all by myself away from the desk. I would have the VoIP phone system connected to my cell phone so no calls would be missed. This allowed me to get some soda or get food and, so on. One time while I was up and away from my desk, I was going down to the lunchroom to grab a soda. The vending machine was on the basement floor. The basement had a wall of windows and one set of security doors. Same for the main entrance, only there was one security camera facing that door. Nothing else makes you really feel very safe. I didn't like going to the basement much because of the back of the building facing into an acre of dark woods. There was a dark path to the woods, but for some reason, they didn't install any lights for the walking path. Never really sure why they did this, but it didn't help for the creepy factor. Sometimes I would see animals run past, and other times, I feel like someone was watching me. I always try my best to make it fast when getting a soda or get a snack, but sometimes it didn't feel that fast enough. One night, I was making my way down to the basement of the building to get a soda. It was a slow, dragging night, and I needed a little bit of caffeine for the pick-me-up. I counted my money as I walked to make sure that I had enough to get in and get out quick. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart from the glass door back into the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks and tried to scan the forest, but like I said, it was just blackness. I felt like a bit of unease, and everything told me to turn my heels and just go back to my desk. But it was 9 p.m., and I had a fair bit of time left on my shift before I can blow this pop stand. I tried to shake the feeling off and briskly walked over to the soda machine and made my selection. The soda dropped, and as I bent down to get it, I heard a loud ping noise. It was as if someone had hit the glass with something. I stood straight up and felt the hairs in the back of my neck stand up. I slowly turned around and was scared to see if someone was out there. But as I made a full turn, I once saw nothing. Nothing but darkness. I thought it was a good time to book it back to the main floor. I didn't bother with the elevator. I went to the stairs and ran up them. My heart was already racing having to go down there in the first place. Then the loud bang, and now running up the 2 flight of stairs. Once I was back to my desk, I sunk down in my chair and tried to calm down. It was just one of those noises. I was just in a building with locked doors and locked inner office. So I'm safe, I told myself. I kept saying over and over in my head that it was just nothing. I was relieved by that, but out of nowhere, I got that feeling of someone was watching me again. I peeked over my cubicle wall and looked around my office. Nothing seems out of place until I turned to face in front of the building. Outside the first set of doors was a slender, tall, dirty male who was cupping his hands around his eyes to try to see past the reflecting of lights inside. I dropped back down in my cubicle before he caught sight of me. He didn't look like anyone I've ever seen in the office before, and it was a little past 9 p.m. There was no good reason why he'd be checking out my office. As I sit in my chair, I hear the door shake. I slowly stood up and watched him pull the handles on the doors. They didn't budge, to my relief, but as I watched him, he turned to face me. His face looked bruised or dirty. I couldn't tell which. Once his eyes were locked onto mine, he started banging harder and smacked the glass. I was so scared. It was the middle of the night and I was all by myself out in the middle of this building complex. I grabbed my headset and dialed 911. While getting the operator online, the guy was walking back and forth from one side of the glass to the next. 911, what is your emergency? The lady voice was direct. Yes, my name is blank. I work at blank. I need someone to come out. There's this guy trying to break into my office building. While speaking with her, the guy disappeared from view. I tried to look in all directions, but I didn't see him. I knew that he wouldn't just walk off now, not with how hard he was banging the door. Out of nowhere, a good-sized rock came out of nowhere and smashed against the door. I screamed and went under my desk. The operator started asking me what was happening. I explained that a rock smashed against the glass door. She asked me if the glass was broken, or was it enough to let him in. I didn't want to stand up and look, but she told me to look in order to know where he was now. I crawled out from under my desk and peeked over the wall, and saw a huge crack down the first part of the door. I sank back down and told her to please have the police hurry up. She said they were on their way. I have read many stories in this subreddit. People say they called the cops and they just couldn't get there fast enough, and they were not kidding. It feels like time is staying still and you can do nothing. Another smash against the door, but along with the glass breaking sound, sirens could be heard coming towards my building. It was music to my ears. I told the operator that the police had arrived and thanked her for all her support. I stood back and looked over the cubicle wall, and the red-blue lights were flashing wildly. But the thing I didn't see was the man. The top part of the door was completely smashed, and the rock was laying on the inside of my entryway. The officer came to the front door, and others were coming around the combining area. I could see their flashing lights moving all around the parking lot. The first officer came into the building and greeted me. He was a very kind man. He was patient with me, and he let me explain what I saw and what happened. Soon, my boss arrived and checked on me and then the damage to the door. At some point, my husband was called and told that I would be escorted home by one of the officers. I took the next few days off and started to look for another job that wasn't all by myself at night. When I gave my statement, I explained to the officer that the person could be partnered with an ex-coworker who was fired a few weeks prior for stealing and just not showing up. He knew where we kept the cell phones that we were selling. Not under locked away and key, but from under a desk of a provisioner. From cell phones to Blackberries, when they were still worth buying, plus VoIP boxes and phone cards. I went on to leave this job a month later and started a credit card machine company. It was an office full of people, still a call center, but I feel safer, especially with the security and cameras all over the building. Like I said before, this company is no longer around. It was bought out by another company, and they basically liquidated all the funds that were worth something. So dirty man who tried to break into my office, let's never, ever meet again. I hope you enjoyed these true, scary night shift stories. If you made this far, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy these stories. Please consider subscribing, as you'd be helping me reach 1,000 subs by the end of the year. If you are asleep, well, maybe you can hear me in your dream world. Keep dreaming, as this is the only time where you can escape reality, and I'll let you listen to the rain. Enjoy the slumber world.